no pleasantries needed. Let's just hop right in. Patriots draft. There was a lot of fans who were upset going into the end of the season. They won that game against the Buffalo Bills. Cost them presumably the number one pick in the draft. They'll now be picking at number four. You've obviously been around the team a good amount in recent history. What's your take on their draft position right now going into the real meat of the pre-draft coverage? And do you think that there is a big difference with them being at number four versus higher in this draft?
Well, I think it's tough to say because we ultimately don't know what the Tennessee Titans are going to do with the first pick. Um, it would obviously be better for the Patriots to be in that spot where if they really want someone like Abdul Carter, that would make it easier for them to get him. But outside of that, if they're looking at offensive tackle, they're going to, the best one's going to be available there at number four. If they're looking for the best receiver, Ted McMillan, he's probably going to be available there at number four. If they want the best tight end, Jacob Bourne, he'll be available there at number four. Likely the same case with Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. Travis Hunter's kind of a different deal. I don't even think he makes sense for the Patriots. I don't think they're in a position to manage that kind of unique prospect and deciding whether he's a corner or a receiver. I think they need more sure bets at positions like offensive tackle and in the front seven. But, for me, I think, and I was thinking about this yesterday, I think that like already the draft coverage has shifted where, I've seen a ton of mock drafts already and none of them have a quarterback going first overall, even though I think we all agree that Will Levis stinks. And I think it's just the general consensus is that neither of these guys, Shador Sanders or Cam Ward, are true top quarterback prospects. Most experts say that, if this were last year, both of these guys would have gone after the top six, which means after Bo Nix. And so, it was very easy for people to get caught up in the hoopla of the regular season finale when the Patriots won a meaningless game and dropped from the number one pick to the fourth pick. And sure, again, it'd be better to be in the number one pick, and I'm sure they could have gotten a decent trade for good assets. But I think it's become abundantly clear that no one in that number one pick is going to get some insane draft haul this year. No one is tripping over themselves to trade up for Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. A lot of mock drafts have Sanders going all the way down at number 7 to the Jets. So yeah, could the Patriots have acquired decent assets? Maybe a later first round or future first or a second or a third, sure. But they have the ammo to do that anyway if they want. The difference between 1 and 4 in this draft basically is nothing. Not nothing, but it's much slimmer than in past years. And they have that Judon pick or the pick from the Judon trade, a third rounder. I think Joe Milton could be a trade asset as good as a second or a third round pick this year. If you're a team that wants to add a young quarterback this year, would you rather get one of these super fringy prospects in the second or third round in a bad quarterback draft, or would you rather get Joe Milton, trade your second or third round pick for Joe Milton? I think that's an easy call. So I still think the Patriots have more than enough ammo to get where they want on the draft board if there's someone that they really want. And I just think it's another lesson in not speaking or speculating in such absolutes around things like draft position and tanking or schedule releases or offseason additions when everyone has I remember a few years ago, Broncos got Russell Wilson, Raiders got Devontae Adams, Colts got Matt Ryan, and everybody had all of those teams, ahead of the Patriots. And I think all of them finished below the Patriots in the standings. So none of us know anything. A lot of these takes usually age poorly. And when it comes to the draft and tanking, more often than not, just play it out. If you're a quarterback needy team and there's a true generational prospect, that's a different conversation. But most of the time, that's not the case. And so I just hope people remember this moving forward when there's all this obsession over losing games at the end of the season for the sake of going up a few more picks.
So then let me ask you, in your opinion, does staying at number 4 make sense, or does it make more sense to move off? Because I agree with you. I think that they are in kind of a position where they need kind of everything besides quarterback. And the names that are predicted to be off the board ahead of them are those guys that I would classify as like athletes, So I think at number 4, I know a lot of people coming off the Super Bowl. There's a lot of talk about interior line, front four. Their need, one of their biggest needs is obviously the offensive line. But like you mentioned, Abdul Carter. Um, I think that they have to be thinking just who's the most impactful potential player at that spot. And I do think that an edge rusher is somebody that you can kind of put in and say, okay, this guy can have an impact for us. And is it like the things that we've highlighted as like our top need or like our our top 2 needs? No, but it's way up there. And an outside linebacker or even a defensive, it's probably a little high from Michael Williams. But even somebody like that, just somebody who can get after the quarterback, might be best if you don't feel that any of those offensive linemen are really worth the reach there at 4.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to things we don't quite know yet, right? Like, for instance, do they think, Dietrich Wise is a free agent. He's also 31. Like, I don't think he's anyone you're thinking about necessarily for the future. But Keon White, like, do they think he is their long-term answer on the defensive end? I think so, but how does Mike Vrabel feel about him, right? It's not his guy. What do they know about Christian Barmore's health? Like, are they not concerned about it? In which case, like, you have that interior disruptive defensive tackle that every team wants right now. But are they really concerned about it? In which case, do you go after a Mason Graham? How do they feel about Will Campbell, whether he's a guard or a tackle? This is one of those things where, one of the big stories at the combine will be how long are Will Campbell's arms? One of these absurd combine storylines. But for him, it might make all the difference where when you saw in the Super Bowl, Joe Tooney, short arms. There's a reason he's not a tackle and why he's a guard. And he ultimately got exposed playing left tackle in the Super Bowl. Like, as fun as it easy to poke, or as easy it is to poke fun at the arm length thing, it does matter a lot of the time unless the prospect is elite in all the other areas. So how do they feel about Will Campbell, right? And so the answers to those questions ultimately will decide what they do. But at the end of the day, one of Will Campbell, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Ted McMillan, like one of those guys is going to be available at number 4. So I think they're good regardless. But I also think, if they don't love taking someone like Will Campbell at number 4, the teams after them in the draft order probably aren't going to identify Will Campbell as like their immediate needs. So the Patriots could trade down to like 7 or 8. And so I think, I do think trading back is probably something that I would look at because I think this is a down draft. And when you're talking about picks like 4 through 12, if you're ranking them in tiers, they're all really in the same tier. And as you said, the Patriots have a bunch of different needs. So I'm not sure they necessarily need to prioritize one or the other. So if I were them, I would be definitely looking at moving down into like the 7 to 9 range. But they have to be confident that one of the top few players on their board is going to be available there.
So, kind of a philosophical question. What is your take on guys that are coming into a professional draft as athletes that they're kind of banking on their athleticism? Travis Hunter is the a number 1 example there, but I also kind of put Shadur Sanders in that bucket because I feel like Shadur Sanders, just because like his dad is the coach, he ended up as a quarterback. But I kind of I didn't watch him play a whole lot, but just when I did watch him play, his arm was not outstanding. So for all of his athletic skills, there is kind of part of me that was like, okay, like he could be a very very good NFL quarterback. But is he like a number 2 pick NFL quarterback? And could he have been, one of these many, college quarterbacks that end up being very good NFL wide receivers, just off of, his football IQ and his athleticism. So I'm just curious what you see when you see these guys coming in and they're classified as athlete.
Well, like for me, if I'm just targeting traits and like I'm looking at a guy like freak athlete, I think those are the kind of swings you take later in the draft. And at times when you sort of ignore maybe even off-field concerns like Javon Baker in the 4th round for the Patriots last year, or taking a swing on someone like Pop Douglas in the 6th round, where he's super undersized, but he's so quick and he's so athletic. But if you're targeting somebody who's maybe athlete first, early in the draft, I mean, you got to be sure that number one, the coaching is good enough, and that he's a good scheme fit. Like Keon White is a good example where good athlete, but his size is weird, right? He's too tall to be an outside linebacker, and he's too small to be a defensive end. So number one, you got to sort of figure out how is he going to fit into your scheme, and number two, you got to like believe for sure that you have the coaches that are going to get the best out of him. N'Kobe Dean, right? Like that's a guy who slipped down a lot of boards, but he was a really athletic player, undersized, but really athletic. And the Eagles looked at him and said, we're confident that we have, the coaching infrastructure to get the most out of him. So just for me, and Christian Gonzalez too, right? Christian Gonzalez is a guy who a lot of his game film, like some of it was great, but a lot of the film against better teams wasn't really great. And there were a lot of questions about his intensity, or his just general makeup. And that was someone who really, it was like his athleticism. He was freakish athleticism, freakish height for the position. And as bad as the Patriots are, with their coaching, the first year he was under Bill Belichick. In both years he was under Mike Pellegrino, who is probably has been one of the better assistant coaches for the Patriots in recent years. So he got good coaching at the position. But yeah, if you're getting a guy who his athleticism probably is currently ahead of his like actual football abilities, then I think you just have to be 100% confident in your coaching and the scheme fit.
And is that coaching there for the Patriots now?
I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, I think certainly, right? I think Mike Vrabel, this track record speaks for itself and what he was able to get out of some of the talent on those Tennessee Titans teams. I mean, who knows about Terrell Williams, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know anything about him. I know he spent time with Vrabel, and he seemed to do a really good job with the Detroit Lions last year. You wonder how much of that was him as the defensive line coach, how much of that was Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator. Who really knows? But I think I think Vrabel's work in Tennessee speaks for itself. On the offensive side of the ball, we went over this in a previous episode where I think we're all really confident in Josh McDaniels, especially as a quarterback mentor, but as a scheme fit, it's hard to know where his scheme is right now, whether it's leans more towards what he did with the Patriots, whether he's truly adopted a lot of other styles and made sort of this hodgepodge that we talked about before. And then they just have to know, how difficult is it, right? That was always a huge thing in past years was, is the entry point too high, too difficult to understand for a lot of these young players? Has he simplified it? And can some of these younger prospects figure it out more quickly than they did in the past? I think that one is a legitimate concern. But again, I don't think it doesn't seem really like they're going to be targeting offensive players unless it's a tackle that early in the draft. It's probably going to be a defensive player if it's not a tackle. And then, so from that perspective, I think Patriots fans should feel great about Vrabel identifying those players and getting the most out of them.